a communist. And Abby's great. She went to Harvard in the 60s and became a communist and rebelled against her family. And she gives all of her money to left-wing charities and concerns. She's fantastic.
That's too good. Keep going. I'm sorry.
No, I mentioned the story to her and she said, yeah, that sounds exactly like something my dad would do. Yeah. What do I know?
Yeah, I guess. Well, she went the opposite way. I give her that, I guess. But how'd you become friends with her?
I'm on the board of Covert Action magazine, and she's a supporter of the magazine.
No kidding. That's not Covert Action magazine. That doesn't sound sketchy at all.
It was founded by Philip Agee, who the CIA tried to assassinate for decades. He was a CIA case officer who saw what covert actions were doing to innocent people in Latin America in the late 60s. And so he went public and wrote a book called Inside the Company. And as an appendix at the back of the book, he listed the names of every CIA officer he ever encountered and outed everybody. And then took off for Cuba. And the CIA hunted him down from country to country to country. They finally gave up. He died in Cuba, I don't know, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And his son has kept the magazine going. And the co-founder of the magazine, Lou Wolf, shout out to Lou, who's now like 87 or 88 years old. He's a good friend of mine. This was Lou's baby with Philip Agee. And the magazine's still a monthly concern. I write for it every month.
Do you think we have so many examples of where covert actions were just taken for like imperialism purposes or just because we felt like overthrowing
There's
government?
actually a Wikipedia page.
Let's pull it up.
Yeah. CIA covert action, Wikipedia. The first one was the 1949 Italian election.
Right, with the communists. And there was a deleted scene in The Godfather that Francis Coppola put in there where Michael's walking in the fields with Fabrizio. Yeah. And he sees it in the hillsides of Corleone, and he sees the red like little army of communist supporters right there, and he's like "Che faccio?" or whatever, and Fabrizio's like "Comunisti," and that was right around it's taking place right around the time where that was going to be a thing where they were going to come in and take over the power vacuum post Mussolini with the opposite side, and then CIA is like
no you don't. That covert action operation, it was the first one, and it's been declassified by the CIA. It was very simple. They gave $150,000 in cash to the Christian Democratic Party, which was the conservative party. It was behind the communists in the polls. They were going to lose the election. The communists were going to win. You can't have a communist government in Western Europe, right? That's just for the eastern part of Europe. And so what they did is they used that money to bribe journalists to write pro-conservative articles in the run-up to the election. And they were able to swing just enough votes that the conservatives won.
And it was only $150,000?
Yeah, it was the first one.
So
that was a lot of money in the 40s, though.
I know, but for the whole party, for a bunch of journalists, I mean, I'm splitting up that pie. It's getting smaller. And you think like Don Calavizzini was taking a baseball bat to people too?
Well, I mean, think of it this way, too. If you're a journalist and you're asked to write 500 words, that's probably worth $500 in 1949 money. I mean, if that's what you get paid today, that was a lot of money in 1949.
Yeah, but if I'm going to swing an election, you got to add a zero to that.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, so you're... All right, so we're looking at this Wikipedia page. Everyone else can pull this up too. And it's funny because Wikipedia is run by the CIA and they can't even stop this article from happening.
Well, oftentimes the CIA gets outed when people look at the ISP information for the editors. It oftentimes goes back to Langley.
They're that dumb. Come on.
Yeah, they're that dumb.
Really?
Yeah. I remember in my own case, we asked for something in Discovery. I don't remember what it was, and it was we were having a meeting. All the attorneys. I had 11 attorneys, and one of them said, "Hey, we should ask for X," and one of the other attorneys said, "Oh, come on, they're not that stupid." And he said, "No, actually, they are that stupid." And sure enough, they had fucked it up, and they ended up having to drop 3 charges.
Just because of that.
They're arrogant.
Careless. Yeah.
They think they're smarter than everybody else is, that they don't make mistakes, or even if they do make mistakes, you're not smart enough to figure out that they've made a mistake. And that's just simply not true.
But it's also like, John, they have a VC arm, as we've outlined before.
They do.
Everyone outlines it in QTEL.
Yes.
And they admit who they invest. Oh, yeah, we threw money in Palantir in 03.
And now look at Palantir. Billions in revenue.
And it's like, that's where sometimes I wonder, yes, I hear you. There's hubris there. There's fuck you. We can do what we want. We're seeing that play out on a massive scale right now. But sometimes I wonder if I'm crazy to wonder it too, if there's like a 5D chess thing here where people are like, we know some of this shit will come out, and that's what we want to happen because we want society to flip the fuck out.
Sure, that happens. That happens sometimes. Yeah.
And it could have happened with things that, not even related to your case, but that CIA might do as it relates to Wikipedia, where they're like, yeah, people will flip out about this by 2025, after 2026, after we do that whole pandemic thing.
Right, exactly.
Oh, exactly.
I mean, as an example. Sure, why not?
Hypothetically,
sure. Okay. Sure. And another thing, too, is if you throw, so many of these ideas for operations out there, or these little mini operations, there's some that are just going to, not come to people's attention. They're not going to realize that it's some sort of a covert action operation or disinformation operation.
A disinformation. See, that's the big one now today. You don't know who's behind keyboards anywhere, right? We do it to a ton of people.
You don't, but even the people who are supposed to be the good guys, you can't trust. I've told you this before. I've got this buddy, Jason Leopold. He's at Bloomberg. Jason is one of the best investigative journalists I've ever encountered in my life. And honest as the day is long. He's the FOIA king. He's filed more Freedom of Information Act requests than anybody else in the history of the Freedom of Information Act, to the point where George W. Bush's Pentagon spokesman called him a FOIA terrorist. On the record, called him a FOIA terrorist. It was Jason that broke the Hillary Clinton email scandal.
Whoa, I didn't know that.
Through a FOIA request.
You got that through a FOIA, that's it?
So he told me, this is about 10 years ago, he told me that he was bored one week over Christmas break. He was bored. So he just filed a FOIA request. He had nothing else to do.
Yeah, that's right.
And he asks for all communications between the CIA and all journalists, period.
Anything.
For this period.
History.
For this period of whatever it was, a year, I think is what it was. And, the CIA never, ever, ever answers FOIAs. They say, they send you a letter saying, okay, thank you, it's in queue. Well, I filed a FOIA request 15 years ago. I'm still waiting.
What's the legality of that, though?
They have 60 days. So what happens is when day 60 comes, you have to sue them. And you will always win. And because the law is clear, they have 60 days. You will always win. And the judge will always make them pay your legal fees because you won.
But
he wins every single time.
They do give it to him.
Yeah, they have to.
So why haven't you gotten yours? It's been 15 years.
Because I haven't sued them.
Right,
I don't care anymore. I wanted to write an article about...
Start a GoFundMe so John can sue these guys.
I wanted to write an article about a guy who I think was probably a CIA officer in the early 50s. And he became a science fiction author. And then he had a mental breakdown and committed suicide. And I think he was one of the MK Ultra victims.
Do you want to say who this is? Or?
You know what? To tell you the honest to God's truth, I don't remember his name anymore. It's been so many years. I'm sure I still have the FOIA request.
The way that started, I was worried you were going to say L. Ron Hubbard.
Yeah. No.
For like, oh, shit.
No, I don't want to poke that hornet's nest. I have enough problems in my life. Thank you. And take on the Church of Scientology. No way. So anyway, he files this FOIA request at Christmas. This is like Christmas of 2015, maybe. And they don't respond. So he sues them. He used the same attorney every time, Jeffrey Light, who's now retired. Jeffrey never, ever, ever lost a FOIA case. And so finally they just give him this dump. And he found several things that were fascinating. One, Ken Delanian formerly of the Los Angeles Times, now the chief intelligence correspondent, chief national security correspondent for NBC News and MS Now. Okay? He was writing articles and then sending them to the CIA for clearance before he sent them to his own editors. Is it okay, guys, if I write this about you? Because if it's not okay, just tell me and I'll kill it.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Number one, scandalous. He should have resigned.
Yeah.
Number two, there was this young, unknown, hungry, independent journalist who actually stumbled on a story. And he's like, hey, I found this information and I'm writing this article. It's going to go out tomorrow. Would you care to comment? And they wrote back to him and they said, so help us God, if you publish this, you will never be invited to the Christmas party ever again. And we will never give you an off-the-record briefing. You're going to be banned.
Oh.
And he killed his own article. You know, people say all the time, oh, Operation, Grasshopper or whatever it was called. Not Paperclip. What was the one where they were recruiting journalists? Operation.
Oh my God.
Whatever.
Not Midnight Climax.
No, that was part of MK Ultra.
Yeah.
MK
Chickwit. Can we look that up, Beef? Mark Gagnon and I talked about that in September 2024 on his show. I remember that, but I can't remember the name.
Mockingbird, thank you. Operation Mockingbird. People are like, well, Operation Mockingbird. They don't need Operation Mockingbird anymore. They just threaten you and tell you you're not invited to the Christmas party. They don't need to recruit people anymore.
It's access journalism.
That's exactly what it is.
Problem.
And it's a result of the demise of investigative journalism. Very, very few outlets anywhere in America have budgets for investigative journalism anymore. I
can't say that I've had people like from intelligence or something call up and try to get you to do stuff. But I've had some weird calls from normal people with normal jobs, let's say in like middleman type things, where they're trying to anchor you to ideas and stories and certain people and stuff like that. I've dealt with it a lot. And it, to me, immediately blinks off as like audience capture.
Right.
And almost all the time, these are things that if I did it, not every time, but a lot of the times, if I did it, we'd make a lot of money.
Yeah,
I believe it. A lot of money.
I believe it.
I won't say what it was, but there were back-to-back days a couple months ago where I was offered whale and whale. Jeez. These are episodes that they would pay my bills for 7-8 months. And I could not have said no fast enough.
Good for you.
Because I know algorithmically what it would also do. Mm-hmm. And that's what they do. They want to get people, whoever the fuck they are, because it's someone who's below
and you'll
10
never
levels,
figure it out,
right?
Who they are.
They want to influence people to get just certain things in the algorithm at all times so that their income becomes tethered to that. And that's a really dangerous thing. I've said to people before, I knew the system probably enough by March or April 2022 that I won't get into details. But if I wanted to have 8 or 9 million subscribers today, I could have done it. I have 1.13.
Which is also incredible.
Thank you. I would love to be able to have more money to put into this, though, and really be able to build it out, and I can't do that, but I've kept my principles intact in doing that, because to get to that 8 or 9, you are selling your soul. There is absolutely no middle ground. There is no gray area. I know exactly what it was, and it's like, do it or don't, but that's an easy call for me.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. If you don't have your self-respect and independence, then what do you have?
Yeah. Now, there's another side to what you're saying, though, about the journalists, though, that gets really weird. And a mutual friend of ours, Joby Warwick, has talked about this openly.
Joby's like the guiding light on this issue.
Yeah.
And he's very diplomatic.
One of the most diplomatic people I've ever met in my life. So Joby's been the national security reporter
forever
at the Washington Post. He's got 2 Pulitzers.
Yep.
And
he's an incredible author. Like his
Unreal.
books just rocket straight to #1 on the New York Times bestsellers list. And they're incredibly researched.
They're so well done. But love the guy. And the very first time I ever talked with him on episode 134, he was going through it and then talked about it with me off camera. He said, there's a really tough thing. He's like, I've got sources in intelligence that I'm really good friends with and stuff. And that's like, then are they telling you the truth? Or are they using the friendship? But then also he goes, you'll write a story. And as a journalist, you have to go to the people involved with the story and offer a chance to comment before it gets published. And he'll get a call from CIA with his editor in the room right there, or NSA or whoever, and say, if you publish this, X number of people will die.
Yeah, they always say that.
Right. And he said, we legit have to go into a conference room and basically play like blind, monkeys throwing darts at the board to see if this is one of those where they're lying or not.
That's absolutely true. Yes. And if it's really, really sensitive, you'll get a call from the National Security Advisor above the CIA director.
Shouldn't that set off a lot of alarm bells, though?
Definitely.
What is the line there? Like let's say there is one, and for real, 150 people, whoever they are going to die from it. Yeah. But
there's no easy answer. I will say, though, that they throw that whole blood on your hands argument at people all the time. Tom Drake tells this fantastic story. Tom Drake, the NSA whistleblower. Tom is the one who first told us that NSA was spying on Americans after 9/11. They were just waiting for 9/11 to happen so that they could spy on Americans, which is what they did, and they continued to do 25 years later. So Tom was charged with 9 felonies, including 7 counts of espionage and 2 counts of theft of government property, which was the information. He walked out of the building with the information in his head, and they charged him with theft.
Thought crime.
Yeah. So to make a long story short, the entire case fell apart and all of the charges were thrown out. But he went to a proffer meeting at the Justice Department where they say, here's the information we have against you, and here's the sentence we're going to ask for when we convict you. Unless you want to confess, tell us some answers to questions we may have, and then we can talk about a slightly lighter sentence. So he was looking at, it was like 55 years. I think it was 55 years. It was a long time. And they said, you have the blood of dozens of American soldiers on your hands. And to his credit, he says, name one single soldier who died because I said NSA was spying on Americans. Name one, and I'll take a guilty plea. Name him. And then they backed off. And then later on, after the case was thrown out, they left the accusations against him on the NSA and the DOJ websites, but they took out the slide where they accused him of having the blood of American soldiers on his hands. They just make that shit up and throw it at you to scare you. They do it all the time.
They even did it with Maduro, who's a bad guy.
Yeah, sure.
Remember the Cartel de los Soles? That got removed from the indictment the minute he touched down over here
Never
on
existed.
On 30th Street.
Mm-hmm. Never existed.
I forget the term for it off the top of my head. Maybe if I describe it right, you can look it up, Deef. But like it's like obfuscation by overstimulation, like providing way too much information that people are like, I ain't reading all that. That you can just kind of like poke in little things.
Like
and just
millions
get away
of Epstein documents.
That's exactly. I love the transition that you were catching on to there, John, because as you said correctly, and we should go back to that now because that's why people are here. But as you said very correctly, there's another 2.5 to 3 million documents. I've heard varying numbers on that. Correct me in the comments, people, that they have now said we're never going to release. And people like Tim Burchett have come out and said, who's seen some of these documents, has come out and said things like this includes cannibalism and stuff like that. And you have to wonder, when you think about let's say, a report that Marjorie Taylor Greene has relayed about her conversation with Donald Trump on this, to where he said, this is going to hurt a lot of my friends if it comes out. You have to wonder what types of friends are being protected, obviously. Mm-hmm. And then furthermore, why the fuck are you friends with these people if these are the things they do? Because to me, it's like, I don't want the president to be a pedophile or associated with that stuff. Fuck, I want to believe he's not. But they fired Joe Paterno in 2 days for covering up one guy in 2002. The guy had the fucking stadium named after him at Penn State. Yep. This is the president of the United States who, again, and I will say this, along with every administration before him, name them, Clinton, Obama, Bush, Biden, Trump 1, all of them. They've all covered this up. And it's the most massive pedophilia and many other things scandal, we'll talk about the national security in a minute, that we've ever seen. What does that say about him?
A lot, unfortunately. And I'll add something to that. There's an internal Bureau of Prisons rule at DOJ that anybody convicted of a child sex crime is forbidden from serving his or her sentence in a minimum security work camp. Can't do it. They also don't serve their sentences in maximum security penitentiaries or medium security prisons because they'll be killed there, right? Everybody beats on pedophiles in prison. So all of the pedophiles go to low security prisons. So there's still, the double concertina wire and the controlled movements and all that stuff. But in a minimum, you're free to just come and go as you please. There are no locked doors. There are no bars in the windows. Most everybody works in town, as a janitor or a gardener.
Pedophiles
Seriously.
are working in town?
They're not supposed to be, because there aren't supposed to be any pedophiles in the minimum security work camps. But that's where Ghislaine Maxwell was sent. Minimum security work. She's the only pedophile in the entire federal prison system who's in a minimum security work camp. And she was transferred there by the president. Why? Why would he do something like that?
I sent you an article before this, Steve. There were a few in the text. I don't know if you can pull it up. But it was the guy talking about the 3 reports related to Maxwell and Trump. If you just go through our text chain, it's somewhere in there. But Deef will get it in a sec, because I sent Deef like 15 things right before we went on. But you have to wonder. This is a lady who's pictured at the Clintons' daughter's funeral leaning over the edge. This is a lady who's pictured with every master of the universe. This is a lady who's directly tied to the royal family, whose father is at the center of this whole thing, who knew Donald Trump for 30. They know, she knew everybody. So what does she have on him? Maybe here's a good way to start it. Do you see any scenario where Jeffrey Epstein, as a spy, which he definitely was a spy, was not prioritizing blackmail as a means to get whatever it is he needed to get?
He had to have been.
Right.
What's the point of running the operation if it's not to collect compromat on everybody just in case? One of the things that I learned very early on at the CIA was we really, really didn't like to squeeze people, right? With, surreptitiously taken photographs of them with prostitutes, or, you want to recruit somebody based on a friendly relationship. You want them to do it because they like you and they trust you. They're probably doing it for the money.
Right.
But you don't want to threaten people. The Russians do that. The Israelis also do that. And so from the very beginning, I thought that this was a part of the whole Epstein saga. It was about blackmail. It had to have been. I don't understand it otherwise. I don't understand what the draw. First of all, he's a creepy looking guy.
Yeah.
He's naked half the time, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
Virginia Giuffre said he had a deformed penis that looked like an egg.
Mm-hmm.
So what's this guy have going for him besides money? But they all have money. So what's the difference?
See, now I want to say something serious, but it's making me laugh. So I had an Epstein victim sitting in that chair the other day, and this part's not funny, but the thing that really struck me in what she was saying, and that episode will come out after this one, by the way, people. It'll be 2 episodes, was how brilliant of a manipulator he was.
Oh, that's interesting.
And that's what he had going for him. And I'm going to give you an example on this that she would say. He would call her up because she was a model and actress and set her up with meetings in Hollywood, New York, wherever, that he's not going to be at, with someone powerful that he knew. And the idea is that she's going to get raped at these meetings.
Oh, my God.
And she would go to them, and most of the time nothing would happen. But he would call her after every single one. Now, when she brought this up an hour earlier, I had asked her the question. I'd said, do you think that, like, we don't know much about Jeffrey Epstein's childhood. We know he had parents. We know he had a brother, grew up in Coney Island. But we don't know what was going on when Jeffrey Epstein was 9 years old. So it's possible he's a monster that was abused as a child. Certainly possible.
Sure.
But, like, let's assume he wasn't. Where do you think a person like that learns the psychological tactics to be able to become this monster to get people? And she was like, that's a great question. And it's like a rhetorical question. I don't expect anyone to have an answer. But then an hour later, she's talking about these phone calls. And he would call her after all of these meetings. And he'd want to know every detail. Like drastically, like, all right, what do you say? What do you do? And he'd be like, did you hook up with her? Which means that she would have been raped. And she'd be like, no. And he'd be like, why not? When you went in there, what do you do? What do you say? And I said, oh my God. He's like Bill Belichick and Tom Brady watching football tape, except he's getting tape of fucking predators and what works and what doesn't.
Yes.
And so that guy having those types of skills, and like the first time he came in and met her, he wanted to know all about her dreams, her family, the dynamics, what she was interested in life, places she wanted to go, you know, all these psychological things that hook you to someone and make you trust them. He obviously had those skills, and these skills would be paramount, correct me if I'm wrong, in being able to be someone who wanted to surreptitiously get information for espionage purposes. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, yes. 100%. Mm-hmm.
So with the blackmail, I was talking with someone else on the phone the other day who I'll probably have on the podcast to talk about this and make the arguments. But he was, I don't know, steel manning the argument that the blackmail was defensive blackmail, paranoia blackmail. And at the end of his argument, I said to him, I was like, every leap you had to make the argument that it was just defensive in nature, I don't have to make a single one of those leaps to say it was offensive in nature.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. You know, and it's one thing to have a little kernel of a story that you tuck back in your mind just in case you need it to protect yourself at some point. It's an entirely different thing to 24 hours a day collect intelligence on everybody. I just don't buy the argument that it was defensive in nature. No.
Meaning he was doing that for himself, but the question is, and now we should get to the origin story. Was he doing that at the behest as a literal employee or as a... Well,
see, that's really the $64,000 question. And my thinking has evolved. Do you know what that's a reference to?
I actually don't.
Oh, it was a game show in the 1950s called the $64,000 question. It was like Jeopardy. You get to the end, and if you win the big prize, it's $64,000. But it went off the air because it turned out it was fixed. And so the producers and the hosts were prosecuted. So it was no longer on TV after a few years. Anyway, when somebody cuts right to the chase, that's the $64,000 question.
Gotcha.
My thinking has changed on this, has evolved on this. I've always maintained that Epstein, to me, was obviously a Mossad access agent. And I said that right here on the show. Now, with the release of this latest tranche of documents, I think he was more than that, and that he was probably not exclusive to the Israelis. I think he was what's called an intelligence peddler or an intelligence broker, but a more sophisticated one. what an intelligence peddler is normally is, let's say you are a Pakistani guy and you work in a restaurant, and two Al-Qaeda guys come into the restaurant, they have lunch, and you hear something. You go to the American embassy and you say, listen, I've got this bit of information. I want to talk to a CIA officer. So John comes downstairs and I say, well, what do you have? And you give me the information. Okay, sounds plausible. I'm going to give you a few $100s for your trouble. But then you go to the British embassy and do the same thing, and then the French embassy, and then the Russian embassy, and then the Chinese embassy. And you've just made 6 months worth of salary, right? That's an intelligence peddler. Epstein would have been far, far more sophisticated than that. And his intelligence is not coming from two Al-Qaeda guys having lunch. It's coming from Bill Clinton and Bill Gates and Alan Dershowitz and Prince Andrew and all of these other movers and shakers that he was constantly in touch with. Now, who would it have been for? Well, we now know from these documents that through his attorney, he was actively seeking an admission by the CIA that he was somehow associated with the CIA. And they did the same thing with the National Security Council. It doesn't look like they ever got a response.
They FOIA'd them when he went to jail in summer 2019. And this was what was interesting. He FOIA'd them for the dates between sometime in 2000 and 2014. Now, here's why this was interesting to me, John, because there's a bigger point I don't want to get lost, but a little tangent. I'm very open-minded on this now because I agree with you. I think we're seeing a lot more, and I think like I saw Dave Smith tweet out something that would have seemed crazy a few weeks ago, and now I'm like, that's not crazy, where he said, I used to think Epstein worked for Mossad, now I wonder if Mossad worked for Epstein. I don't think I'm there. However, it does feel like there wasn't I used the word employee in my question. It does not feel like there was an employee relationship. That's fair.
I agree. And that's one of the things that I've changed in my own mind. Not an employee of Mossad. We know from these latest documents that he had some sort of association with MI5 and MI6, essentially the FBI and the CIA of the UK.
That's right.
We know that he made an approach to the German intelligence service. And we know that he tried hard to get a one-on-one meeting with Vladimir Putin. They went back and forth, and finally the Russians agreed that he could meet with Putin and 3 other people. And he said, no, it has to be just Putin. And the Russians said no. What the fuck is that all about? Why would he, what would he have to say to Vladimir Putin that is so sensitive that the head of the, SVR couldn't be in the room? He had to say it directly to Putin.
All right, let me throw a fishing line out here. That's all this is, people. It's a fishing line. You don't have to bite on this. So I had David Satter in for episodes 92 and 133 back in 2022.
I don't know how you remember the episode numbers. I don't remember who I interviewed a week ago. And I see the icon pop up on my thing, and I'm like, I have no idea who that is.
I have a photographic audio-visual memory. It helps. But David Satter was actually roommates with Bill Clinton, or on the same hall as Bill Clinton at Oxford, and knew him, and then later had some issues with Clinton, which was interesting. Really a nice guy. I like David. David became the chief Moscow correspondent for the Financial Times in 1976.
Wow.
He was then kicked out of the Soviet Union in somewhere the area 87, 88. He was one of the last people unkicked out after it flipped over to being Russia again, but came back. And as Russia was rebuilding itself, if you want to call it that, became the preeminent psychologist of Putin in the Western world. He eventually became the first Western journalist to be banned from Russia in December 2013, conveniently right before Maidan, when he was at the Ukrainian embassy looking to go back into Russia. Basically, he got the FSB line where they're like, I forget what the exact line was. It was like 15 minutes into episode 92. It was very dramatic, but like it was something like, whoa, okay, you're going to get whacked if you go in there. Jeez. And so David obviously has a lot of strong opinions because Putin literally killed some of his friends. Boris Nemtsov was someone he was tight with. Anna Politskaya was someone he was tight with, right? So obviously he doesn't like him at all, and I fully understand that. But after David was there the first time, I was reading one of his books, and I forget which one it was, but there was a little mention in there that just made the hairs on my arm go up. 6 months before that, maybe, I had been reading this series by Henry Abbott about the relationship between Jeffrey Epstein and Apollo Global. That ring a bell?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Drexel, Burnham, Lambert becomes the guys who found Leon Black, all that. Mm-hmm. Basically, Henry Abbott is a basketball reporter. He had a blog on ESPN called True Hoop. I used to read this when I was a kid, and then ESPN laid off everybody in the 2010s because they lost money, so he just kept his blog and did it from the outside. So he sees that some guys from Apollo Global get on the ownership of like 3 different NBA teams. And in 2020, he's like, that's interesting. They're kind of connected to Epstein. Let me do an investigation of that.
Oh, my God. He's
planning on doing a 2 or 3 part investigation. Fucking guy goes nuts. It becomes a 21-chapter investigation, some of the greatest shit I have ever read in my life. And one of the things that he really outlined, and it was sourced out the fucking wazoo, was the whole Adnan Khashoggi thing. And the Adnan, I've been waiting to bring this up the whole time, the Adnan relationship with Jeffrey Epstein from an arms dealing perspective, from a sex trafficking perspective, from an international like government communication perspective. So fast forward again, back 6 months later, I'm reading David's book, and he mentions this one war that was like it was like one day that happened in the middle of like the second Chechen war, when Putin's basically seizing power at the time as a wartime leader, and then eventually is able to move up the elections and get into office. But I forget even what it was, but some army invaded that was related to Russia. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but it was something like this. Basically like invaded Dagestan with a bunch of helicopters, dropped, a few bombs or something, and then left. And they were going to come back. But a meeting was organized between the Russian government and the Dagestanis in either Monte Carlo or Nice.
Seriously?
At the home of Adnan Khashoggi, and he just had it in there.
That is a stereotypical Adnan Khashoggi thing to do.
And why would that be for people out there who are not familiar with Adnan Khashoggi?
Adnan Khashoggi, his actual name in Arabic is Khashoggi. Saudi arms dealer, Saudi man about the world, fixer, friend of kings and presidents and prime ministers, the uncle of Jamal Khashoggi, who was the Washington Post columnist whacked by the Saudi crown prince.
I believe he's a cousin to Dodi Fayed, too.
No way.
Did I just say that out loud? Can we Google that?
Is that true?
Did I make that up? I might have made that up. Khashoggi related to Dodi Fayed?
So, when...
He's the maternal uncle.
No way. Yeah. The Fayeds are Egyptians.
Yeah, uncle and nephew. I'll just pull it up for you. Right here.
Saudi arms dealer Adnan Khashoggi was the maternal uncle of Dodi Fayed, making them uncle and nephew rather than cousins. Dodi Fayed's mother was Samira Khashoggi, who was the sister of Adnan Khashoggi.
Actual uncle and nephew.
And Dodi Fayed was the man that Princess Diana was dating, who was killed alongside her.
Incredible. I never knew that.
Continue, John.
So
it's all tied together.
It is.
It's all tied.
The world's not a big place.
No.
So when Congress passed a law in 1983 that we could no longer arm the Contra rebels, Colonel Oliver North, who was the Pentagon designee to the National Security Council, decided to just go around the law. And he did that by contacting Adnan Khashoggi and organizing a very complicated operation whereby we would sell arms to the Iranians, which was against the law. We would do that through Khashoggi. He used his own bank account in Cyprus to take payment for the weapons, and then he would give the money. He would take, 10% for himself. He was Mr. 10%. He would take the money and then transfer it to accounts controlled by Oliver North and John Poindexter and Admiral Richard Secord, all from the National Security Council, and then use that money to buy arms on the gray market to send to the Contra rebels. It was all illegal. Everybody was indicted. Nobody really was punished, even though they were indicted. And Adnan Khashoggi just took his money and smiled and got back on the yacht and steamed around the Mediterranean.
He's a fixer among many other things, but he worked for himself.
Mm-hmm.
Who did he most assist in his efforts? I genuinely don't know the answer to that question.
Probably us.
Okay.
I mean, he was very, very close to the Saudi royal family, of course. He was a Saudi, is a Saudi. I think he's still alive, although he's got to be really old by now. He was very close to the Saudi leadership. He's deceased now? Oh, yeah, 2017. Yeah, he was pretty old. Yeah, well, he wasn't that old, 83. 82. So he was one of these guys like Mark Rich who would just deal with anybody who had money, anybody who could pay. So he would work with the Israelis, he would work with the Americans, he would work with, anybody, the Libyans, the North Koreans. It didn't make any difference.
Now, there's two guys, though, because what you're talking about also with Iran-Contra ties into that al-Yamama deal that happened, which was around the same area. I'll come back to that. But there's two guys that Epstein comes into contact with upon leaving Bear Stearns, who basically seemed to cut his teeth in arms dealing and, I'll say, sex trafficking. He probably already had pretty good expertise in money laundering, which he seemed to learn well when he was on Wall Street. But it's Khashoggi and English pronunciation there, and Douglas Leese.
I don't know him.
In Britain. So Douglas Leese, I should have had this. There's a guy who did an amazing 20-minute documentary on YouTube outlining this whole thing. I want to find it so that we can give him credit, but I had heard about this before. Douglas Leese was a guy that Epstein claimed to have a falling out with later, who was basically like a British fixer and arms dealer who took in Jeffrey. I forget how he got introduced to him, but it was at the same time as Khashoggi, and they started. Then the Iran-Contra thing came in, and the al-Yamama deal came in Saudi Arabia. And what happened later is that Epstein's fake passport, which is like Maurice or something, whatever, was recovered, which you can deduce from the time it would have had to be provided to be that good by some sort of intelligence service.
Yep.
Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
In the early 80s? And they were able to, afterwards, chart with the information we've gotten through files, chart all of Epstein's movements through countries directly related to getting to Saudi Arabia on all the right dates to help in some way for this deal to go through. Is he not working for anyone? Because there's something I'm going to bring up after this, but at that point, is he just a guy who's getting introduced to these other independent contractors and therefore just working for them and it serves whatever purpose it serves? Or do you think at that point perhaps he was already working with Mossad or CIA or both?
Oh, I think the latter. Especially Mossad, they're very good at spotting talent. They really are. A lot of thought goes into this kind of thing. And, the way his career moved as quickly as it did, the way he accumulated wealth at a fantastic speed,
right,
tells me that he connected with an official body early on. When I was at the CIA, I never, ever heard of Jeffrey Epstein. Never.
Not once.
Not once. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. But never once did his name ever come up. And, for a while, I was up on the 7th floor spending all day, every day with the director, the deputy director for operations, the chief of staff, the executive director, the deputy executive director. These are serious people. They're running the CIA. And it never, ever came up even offhandedly. Khashoggi, we talked about a lot.
So you did talk about Khashoggi a lot. Mm-hmm. What was the context to that usually?
He could do anything. He could do anything. And he was willing to do anything so long as there was a nice fat paycheck for him at the end.
Right. Mm-hmm. I'd asked another guy I know who was at FBI if he had come across. He was like, "Oh yeah, there's a flow chart on that, big time."
Ali Yamama was so huge. I mean, everybody knew about Ali Yamama, and Ali Yamama was also very public.
What was the nature of that deal? Again, it was like 100. It was maybe I don't want to get the number wrong.
It was a lot. That deep? Can we just so I can refresh my own memory too? $600,000 barrels.
So 600,000 barrels of crude oil per day to the British government. Name of a series of record arms sales by the United Kingdom to Saudi Arabia, paid for by the delivery of up to 600,000 barrels of crude oil per day to the British government. The prime contractor has been BAE Systems and its predecessor, British Aerospace. The first sales occurred in September 1985, and the most recent contract for 72 Eurofighter Typhoon multi-role fighters was signed in August 2006. Mm-hmm. So this goes on for
decades.
Yeah. And part of what Prince Andrew is now being accused of when he was trade envoy for 10 years is covering up or refusing to share information as it pertains to Jeffrey Epstein's involvement in the Al Yamama deal.
That's right. So see, this is yet another question that we're probably not going to get an answer to. What could Jeffrey Epstein possibly have been able to contribute in the Al Yamama deal?
I've been thinking about almost nothing else for the last 27 hours.
He's not even the right nationalities.
Right.
You know?
He did kind of have that thing, though, where, especially back then when he had the fro going and all that, where he could kind of blend. I'll give him that.
Right.
But he had those manipulation skills with people where, and also, John, I don't know, maybe you could speak to this better, because you can look at this from an espionage perspective because you're trained to think like that. But in the regular world, right, which espionage occurs in the regular world, guys like him, when you hear him talk, the Coney Island accent, the all shucks kind of whatever, just on the surface, when
it's
you
disarming,
don't know, right?
Absolutely. That's all part of the thing, part of the delivery, part of the training. Sure.
There's something about that. It reminded me in a different way of my friend Luis Navia, who was here in episodes 221 and 222. He was like the chief smuggler for the cartels, except the Asian ones, his quote, not mine, around the world until 2000 when he was taken down in Operation Journey in Venezuela by like fucking 15 countries. But he walks up, you think he's a mix between Francis Ford Coppola and Mr. Magoo. He never carried a gun. He wasn't the violent guy. And he'd just be like, "Oh, what the fuck?" And people were like, "I can't even." No, like, Luis, he would tell these stories. And they're like, "No, Luis, we're going to kill you." And he's like, "Listen, bro, I got places to be. Like, can we go to the bar or something?" And they'd be like, this fucking guy. And they just wouldn't.
Some are unflappable.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think there's a little something like that in Jeffrey Epstein where people, even from a totally different background, worldview, or, political desires, they'd get in a room with him and they're like, the fucking balls on this guy. Could you see that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Although, yeah, I could see that through the first arrest even. But then he had to have concluded that things were so bad in 2019 that this was it. It was over.
Why? Why do you say that?
Because he killed himself.
You do believe he did?
I do. I believe he killed himself.
What makes you believe that, considering all the evidence that they have?
See, but the evidence isn't as clear as I think most people would want it to be. For example, and I base this on my own experience in the federal prison system. Mm-hmm. The guards, number one, have their heads up their asses 24 hours a day. The only qualification to be a prison guard in the federal system, the Federal Bureau of Prisons, is you have to be working on a GED and no felony convictions. That's it. There's this rule that prisoners can't touch the mail, right? So we have mail call every day at 4 o'clock, and the guards are supposed to say your name and hand you your mail. Most of the time, the guards didn't do mail call. Prisoners did mail call in violation of the rules. Any idea why? Because they couldn't read. It was as simple as that. The guards couldn't
Total
read.
incompetence, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they literally could not read to call out the names. So number one, they're idiots. Number two, the cameras are always broken. Always. I was a janitor in the chapel when I was in prison. And every day, part of my job was to go in there and break up guys having sex in the chapel.
In the chapel.
Yeah.
In the
Because
presence of the Lord.
that's what I said. You guys, this is God's house, for heaven's sake. What are you going to do? But the reason they would all be having sex in the chapel is because they knew that the cameras didn't work. None of the cameras work. The guards are supposed to be doing their rounds every 15 minutes, or if there's a suicide watch situation going on, every 8 minutes. And with Epstein, it was like 2 hours before they finally made their rounds. Why? Because number one, they're either jacking off in the guard booth, which happens all the friggin' time, or they're sound asleep in the guard booth, or they're on the phone with their girlfriends, or they're surfing the internet. So no, they don't make the rounds. And then people are like, oh, but there's a glitch. You know, there's this 1 second glitch. Yeah, because every night the cameras reset themselves. They're old cameras. They still use tape, and they tape over yesterday's.
Then why don't
cameras.
they let the guards talk? Why were the guards like...
Oh, they would never let because the guards are... Yeah, I just stopped myself from saying a word that's not supposed to be
retarded?
used. These guys are so stupid. You know, a guard from the prison where I was emailed me. He saw one of the podcasts, and he said, "This is exactly why we wanted to kill you." And I said, "Bring it, tough guy."
Why he wanted to kill you?
Yeah, because I say they're morons and retards and this and that, and it's all true. It's true. Learn to read, and then maybe we can have a conversation. I mean, otherwise, put up. Let's go. I'm not afraid of these guys. But this is why everything went wrong. Because what we saw go wrong the night Jeffrey Epstein died goes wrong every night. It's the same thing.
But so perfectly like that, you think it could line up that way?
Yes, I saw it. I saw it. For example, not supposed to have microwaves in the housing unit, right? Mm-hmm. And then people are like, you know, you bitch long enough, they're gonna put in a microwave. So they put in a microwave. All right, there was a serial killer in my unit, and he took a liking to me inexplicably. So we called him Truck because he was a long distance truck driver, and he would murder prostitutes all along his route, and he got caught. So he would be like, "Hey, John," he had these like rotten black little nubs for teeth. "Hey, John, I saved you a seat in the TV room. Watch the Steelers game." I'm like, "Thanks, Truck." Or, "Hey, there's a new classic rock station. I know you like classic rock. It's 1600 AM. Thank you, Truck." Truck hated pedophiles. Hated them. Fully a third of the prison is pedophiles. Because remember, they're all at the low security level.
Right.
So there's like this rule in prison. No pedophiles are allowed in the TV room. And pedophiles aren't even allowed in their own room unless it's to sleep. Okay? So if you're a pedophile and it's the middle of the day, get the fuck out of the room. Well, there's a pedophile in his room. And the guy's like, blah, 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 blah. He won't stop talking. Well, another thing is pedophiles aren't allowed to have any visitors in their rooms. You can't have another pedophile because they're going to talk about pedophilia, which is what they do. They relive their crimes every single day. They can't help themselves. So this pedophile is just yapping away, and Truck is getting angrier and angrier and angrier. And finally, the pedophile lays down for a nap. Truck had gone to the commissary and he bought a bottle of olive oil, which is $2.85. You can, because everybody cooks in their cells.
Plastic or glass?
Plastic. So he pours the olive oil into a bowl and he microwaves it so it's boiling. Like literally it's bubbling, boiling, scalding oil. And he pours it on the pedophile's face while he's sleeping. And the scream, I'll never forget the scream. And his skin is just like dropping off of his skull. And the pedophile got, medevaced to Pittsburgh. They landed a helicopter in the yard and medevaced him to Pittsburgh. Truck got another 10 years onto the 40 he was already doing for being a serial killer.
He was only doing 40 as a serial killer?
I know, right?
He had a great lawyer.
Yeah, he did. But the point is that there are rules for everything and nobody pays any attention to them, and nothing works the way it's supposed to.
Then why does the Justice Department come out and say things like, oh, here's all the evidence, and then they show that they didn't put all the evidence out? And I'm just talking about like that.
Well, then that proves my point. Because people are idiots at every single level. It doesn't matter if you went to Harvard Law School, you can still be an idiot.
Right.
And another thing too, this is a lesson that government officials, especially senior government officials, just cannot learn. And it is that the cover-up of the crime is always worse than the crime.
Oh, yeah.
Always. You know,
a lie begets 10 more lies, begets 100 more lies.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Richard Nixon didn't resign because of Watergate. Richard Nixon resigned because of the cover-up of Watergate. I think it's the same situation here.
All right, well, let me flip it around on you. I have always thought, still do think that Jeffrey Epstein is dead. And I feel pretty comfortable with that.
I spoke to his brother recently.
Oh, you did?
I said, is he dead? And he's like, he's dead. I identified the body. I'm just saying.
I spoke to OJ. I didn't speak to him, but he said he didn't do it. You know what I mean?
He identified the body. He said, I think he was murdered. And that's a debate, that he wanted to have with me. But he said, yeah, he's dead. I identified his body. I took it to the crematorium.
Joseph Scott Morgan, friend of mine, broke this down. He's a medical death investigator. He broke it down like scientifically with all the bones, the hyoid bone and all that about what would not make sense about it being suicide and therefore it being murder. Obviously, Dr. Michael Baden, who's like the GOAT with all this.
He's the GOAT.
Also does not think that he killed himself. Right. So it's possible. It's at least possible that he was killed.
It's possible. Definitely. All right. Absolutely.
Now, I do think he's dead. But again, this whole thing is just like, you almost have to open your mind to fucking everything. That's crazy. So I'll ask it like this. If you were tasked, not that you ever would be, it's hypothetical, people, but if you were tasked with making the world believe that Jeffrey Epstein was dead and getting him out of that prison without anyone knowing to wherever he's going to go to get fucking facial surgery and live out his life, how would you do it?
Oh, you would take out the body, whether it's a body double or, made out of silicone or whatever, take it out in full view of everybody. That's how I would do it. Let as many people as possible see this body so that reasonable people can agree to disagree.
They did do that. And there was a New York Post reporter very ready to go.
And there was the conversation about the ear, which I've heard 1,000 million times.
Those ones I'm always a little skeptical of because they can doctor the image.
Of course. Yeah. Well, it's like this stupid, obviously AI-generated picture of him just like walking down the street in Tel Aviv.
Oh, that one's not real. But I'm saying, so the recipe you just gave me, though, is in line. It's not to say that's
with
what happened.
They did. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, because I had another guy in here, Candace Gibson, who's worked in media forever, and he's like, the idea that a New York Post reporter on an early Saturday morning in fucking August was that ready to go immediately after this?
Yeah.
Sketchy.
And another thing, too, is if I wanted if I wanted to initiate a cover-up of this scale, I would cremate whatever it is I took out on that gurney. Because otherwise you'd be having people say, okay, let's just settle this. We're going to dig him up. We're going to get a court order. We're going to exhume the body. We're going to do DNA testing and make sure that this is Jeffrey Epstein. Can't do that.